Mimi G here of mimigstyle.com with another sew along as part of my most recent pre-spring collection for simplicity. Today we're going to be sewing along to pattern 8291. Let's get started. Now if you're new to sewing or you need a refresher course, make sure and visit the Sewing Basics video linked in the description box below. Watch that, then come back and follow along with me. For this sew along, you're of course going to need pattern 8291, and on the back of the pattern envelope it gives you exact fabric suggestions and yardage needed for whatever size you plan to cut. Alright, let's go over all of the pattern pieces that you're going to need to cut. Now if you're going to be doing view A or B, then you're going to need pattern piece number 5, which is the sleeve. I'm going to be doing the sleeve version in the tutorial. If you are not going to be doing view A and B and instead will be doing view C, then you do not need to cut pattern piece number 5. You're going to need to cut out pattern piece number 2, which is the left front. Now you can color block this dress or make the entire thing out of one color. If you decide to color block it, then your left front will be a different color than the right front. So just make sure to decide what side you want to color block and then make sure to cut those pieces out of that color fabric. You're going to be cutting out one of these. You're going to need to cut out pattern piece number 1, which is the right front, and you're also only cutting out one. Then you're going to cut out 2 of pattern piece number 4, which is the back of our dress. And then lastly, you're going to cut out pattern piece number 3, which is the side front, and you're going to cut out 1. Once you have all your pattern pieces cut out, we can start to sew. Now before we get started, I want you to go to your sewing machine. I want you to create 2 rows of basting stitches using the longest stitch you have, and we're going to create gathering here between your notches. So make 1 row 5/8 of an inch away from the edge and then 1/4 inch away from the first row. 2 rows of basting stitches. You're going to do that for both your shoulders. Now I want you to go ahead and grab your right front and your side front, and you should have 2 notches along the curve and then 2 notches on the curve of your side front. So I want you to pin these together first, right sides facing, and pin. And you're going to pin this all the way around along the curve. When you get to this curve here, you can go ahead and create a couple of snips into your fabric. And then pin that curve. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along the entire curve down to our hem. Okay, now using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, go ahead and backstitch. Backstitch at the end. If you have a serger, go ahead and serge off your seam allowance. Okay, once you have them sewn together, and if you had a serger serged, then you can go ahead and give it a good press, and you're going to set the front aside for just 1 second. Go ahead and grab your back pieces, and we're going to pin along the center back, making sure that you are matching up your 3 notches. So pin there first. Now we're going to go ahead and take this to the sewing machine, and we're going to stitch down the entire center back using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and back stitching at the beginning and at the end, we're going to sew all the way down. Now you can press your seams open, or you can go ahead and finish with your serger. All right, once you have your center back done, sewn together and pressed, you can grab your front pieces and you're going to lay them right sides facing, matching your shoulders, and you're going to pull your gathering stitches so that your front pieces fit onto your back shoulder. Distribute your gathers evenly, and then you're going to do the same thing with the other side. Now we're going to take this to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, we're going to stitch across our shoulder. Back stitch at the beginning and at the end. Stitch across your other shoulder the same way. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and finish our neckline. Now in the directions of the pattern, you have the option of using a bias binding, and if your knit fabric is very thin, I would suggest doing that. Mine has a little bit of weight to it, so I'm just going to serge, as you see here, around the edge, and then I'm going to turn 5/8 of an inch to the inside, and I'm going to stitch close to the edge all the way around. Okay, so I already pressed my neckline under 5/8 of an inch all the way around, and now I'm going to stitch about a 1/2 inch from the folded edge. Okay, now with the back completely out of the way, we're going to overlap our fronts. So I'm going to overlap my right over my left. And you should have notches that match up, so go ahead and pin there. And then I'm going to pin one more time. And then you're going to do the same thing on the other side. You should have a notch. So pin there first. And now I want you to go to the sewing machine and you're going to stitch these down. Okay, now we're going to stitch our sides down. And then you're going to do the other side. Okay, we're going to go ahead and attach our sleeves. So I have the back of the dress to the right of me and the front of the dress to the left of me, and I'm going to use the flat method to attach my sleeve, which is what I usually do when working with knits. So what we're going to do is right sides facing. I'm going to match up my notches and my dots, so you should have a single notch for the front, a double notch for the back, and you should have either dots or notches that you made that were on your pattern piece. So I'm going to pin those first. And then my double notch. And then we can go ahead and ease our sleeve cap in by pulling a little bit as we're sewing, and if you need to, depending on what fabric you're using and how stretchy it is, you can cut a few snippets into your dress to allow for the sleeve cap to fit. Go ahead and pin both your sleeves the same way, and then we're going to go to the sewing machine, and in one continuous stitch we're going to sew them together using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, we're going to backstitch at the beginning and at the end using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're gonna sew your other sleeve the same way. Okay, once we have our sleeves sewn in, we're going to go ahead and pin up the arm to the underarm and then all the way down our dress, and we're going to sew it in one continuous seam. Make sure that you match up your underarm seams and you match your notch on the front to the notch on the back at the side. You're going to pin your other side seam the same way. We're going to go to the sewing machine and stitch this using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you would like to do any fitting at this point, I would suggest sewing the entire side seam using a basting stitch that you can easily remove. Try it on, see if it fits. If you need to take it in, let it out. Once you have it the way you want, you can go ahead and do your permanent stitch. Using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and back stitching at the beginning and at the end, we're going to start sewing at the hem all the way up to the arm, underarm, and then down our sleeve. You're going to do your other side seam the same exact way and then go ahead and serge off your seam allowance. Alright guys, that's it. All you have to do now is finish the hem allowance of your dress and on your sleeve as well. After you go ahead and try on your sleeve, make sure that you have it the length that you want, and then you are all done. I hope you've enjoyed this sew along. Until next time, peace.